Welcome everybody to Talking Niagara this morning, April 7th.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Okay. So quite a few things to deal with this morning. Start at the beginning with the first thing you sent me, Trump cult.
Yes.
Got a number of videos and articles here relating to the Trump cult. And there's a new book out there's a book by Stephen Hassan out called The Cult of Trump.
Yeah, unfortunately I can't open it. I'm gonna have to find it again. I didn't read it because once I sent it to you, then I couldn't open it again. But basically, what it is saying that the aspects of Donald Trump's following are cult-like, and it is because that he is a leader with messianic appeal. Basically, people will become very loyal to him, and no matter what he says, it's true. No matter what, very much Jimmy Jones kind of thing, and people are going to be willing to do extraordinary things, like commit suicide, like what's happening on the stock market this morning.
Yeah.
Anyway, if we can return to that maybe tomorrow a little bit more, but there's all this. I've seen this before. Basically, that there's this idea that Trump is a leader like no other. That he has this fanatical base that will believe him no matter what, and he has almost a religious sort of among the a lot of the sort of the fundamentalist Christians in the South. They have this belief that he's their savior sent by God, type of thing. So unfortunately, I couldn't read the article because once I sent it to you, then I couldn't open it back up again.
Well, this whole thing about cultism is actually been, it's been clear, before, but then again, I'm always very wary of utilizing a word like cult.
Yeah, well, I wanted to put it out there to our listenership that what do you believe? Do you think there are aspects of cultishness among Trump followers? We found that a lot of people who were on the edge voters swung over to Trump, mostly because they didn't like what I can now see why Trump has bankrupt so many companies with his math is wrong. Yes, we see that today. We see that today that the stock markets around the world are beginning to plunge again. The futures started to plunge yesterday because they opened before the stock market. They were in the red very quickly. Stocks all around the world have plunged. There is a little bit of light, though. A couple of them bounced back a little bit but I don't know to how much they are. The confusion is still there. I don't know what Trump's off ramp is going to be because there is as many theories. Depending on who you try to figure out when you start to research this, there's as many theories of what's happening as there are people you talk to.
Yeah.
Or find on.
I wish I'd have figured out the stock market thing, say, at the beginning of all this.
Yeah, I didn't really think that the Congress and the legislative part of the U.S. the Republicans will let this go so bad. They are just falling in line with Trump, and they're afraid of him, more afraid of him than they are of the future of the United States markets. There are theories out there like crazy. Like one of the preeminent ones is that among his supporters is that he's crashing the market on purpose to lower the value of the dollar. That this is
It's a
an act
theory
of
I've,
genius. So you get everything from that's an
yeah,
act of genius
it's
to
a
an act
theory
of
I've heard
genius.
before. It's a theory I've heard before because, in fact, then it makes, in fact, actually, then it makes the dollar more attractive to buy. But if you think about this, the converse thing is that during its heyday, the pound was always high. The pound was always the highest currency in the world, almost never was never lowered, right?
The pound was in really good shape before for the First World War. It was
Exactly.
very, 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 very strong.
Even up to the Second World War, it was still fairly strong.
Yes, but particularly the First World
Yeah.
War, where they had everything going their way.
So nothing would defeat the British pound almost at one point, right? So you know, with the empire, the strength of the empire, the way it was, the pound was absolutely solid.
Yes, but war is what killed the British economy. Two wars in a
Yeah,
row killed the
of course,
British economy,
of course.
and right now we aren't in a war. We're in a trade war. Will that kill the U.S. dollar? But it said that one of the theories is Trump is doing this on purpose to lower the American dollar, so it'll improve the trade of U.S. items. If the U.S. dollar is lower, other places will buy more around the world. That's true in a sense, but you still have the major players like China who will not let their currency float and will devalue it as they see fit because they have ultimate power. They don't let it go. They don't let it float according to market.
Yeah.
There's the other reasoning, particularly with China, is that because China is a export driven economy, it depends almost entirely on exports. By tariffing China and disrupting China trade practices, that this will hurt China. Well, definitely hurt China, but may hurt it so much so that the U.S. can sort of stop the staunch of flow of American money into China. 8886. There's more of a cult with Trump hater than supporters. Some won't even research the man, but they're more fixed on hate. I
There is a
didn't,
certain amount of truth in that.
the article I was referring to, Gary, was one more of a scientific article. It wasn't a CNN thing, and it wasn't from any of the sort of left leaning agencies. It was basically just analysis of of how the people support him and those who do support him. And the sort of like you can't do anything wrong.
Well, I think the thing here is that Gary's to a certain degree right. There's a cult, and you're to a certain degree right, or this article is to a certain degree right. There's a cult in two directions. There's the pro-Trump cult, and there's the anti-Trump cult.
Yeah, there are these factions that Trump can't do anything right, and the other ones that says Trump can't do anything wrong. Well, he's human. He's going to be able to do some things wrong, and admittedly, he had done some good things in his first term. But when you get to the point where they won't even admit that he lost the 2020 election, that kind of thing, when there is no evidence otherwise, that kind of thing starts to add up.
Yeah.
You find, but anyway, I think it's a little premature to call Trump a cult that is following a cult, but I put it out there. It was somebody who had analyzed cults.
I think it's a bad word to be using, but still.
Well, yeah, but it began to show the tendencies, I believe, that people are watching, and this was, like I said, it was more of a scientific paper than it was anything else. So and it was showing tendencies and comparing him to other times where cult type figures came into prominence. But we find here that Trump has been able to get the whole Republican Party in line and do his bidding at anything. These current tariffs should be part of what Congress does.
Yeah.
Congress, the Republican Congress, has given him power over what Congress normally does. Congress is the one that usually fixes rates like that, and we'll see how long Congress and the legislature and the Senate allow him to keep continuing along this way. But in any case, yeah, I think it's a little premature to call him a cult, but I put it out there because there are some tendencies, and like I say, it was a scientific paper. It had nothing to do with any party.
Yeah, I get it.
And basically, it was the opinion of one person. And while there's a couple more than one person that are saying this, but one person in this particular case was analyzing some data and figured that there was aspects of a cult amongst his following.
Yeah. All right. Mark Carney is drawing criticisms from Francophone Canadians who are saying that his French skills are not good enough.
Well, they aren't very good. They are. He can make, according to all reports, that he can make his way in French, but he isn't a very fluent speaker. He's learned French. He can. Every once in a while, he has to switch back to English when he's speaking French because he doesn't have the words at his command. So this is going to be problematic for the Quebecois and how they vote. This would probably mean that the Bloc.
Yeah. Yes and no. But when you look at if you look at the polls when it comes to Quebec, the national following in Quebec, yes, it's always true that PQ are out in the lead. Liberals are in third place at 19%, but that's fairly typical of in Quebec, isn't it?
Well, Quebec, yeah, we don't know how Quebec is thinking right now. They may allow Liberals to win a number of seats in Quebec, despite Carney's inability to speak French well. Remember, right now, everybody's thinking of a different thing altogether. Everybody is thinking more of Trump and his tariffs than much anything else. So this may be set a precedent where somebody does not speak French very well, actually has some influence in Quebec. We'll see about that.
Well, and when you're looking at if you go look at some now, I can't admit to knowing a lot of these, but you look through Quebec, and there's a large number of seats in Quebec that are defined as safe liberal, right?
Yeah, there usually is. Yeah. There usually is.
There's also a few seats in there that are safe conservative, and there's a few seats in there that are very safe Bloc Québécois, obviously.
You would expect that, yeah.
And you would expect that in anyone. You don't actually see too many NDP seats, but where they've got is, so in a couple of instances, like Beauport Lemoilo, the CPC, it's a block seat where CPC may be looking to pick it up, right? But again, these things happen in every election, right? So, and again, there's conservative seats where they're looking to keep them.
Well, we'll see about the whole thing. I think Polyev will bounce back a little bit now. He's bled badly. The Conservative Party has bled badly, and that's basically because Trump has made the Liberal Party great again. I swear that the Liberal Party has a little private shrine with Trump's picture in it, and they throw flowers at his feet because without him, the party was sunk.
Yeah.
And they're going to make the most of that. They're going to make
yeah.
the most of that. And Polyev, prior to all this, had been sounding very much like a Trump Republican when he was doing his stump speeches and stuff like that. He's changed that around. I see that he's got his wife out there, right in there. That's what he's got to do. He's got to change his image to a person who is much more, I would say, much more family oriented, much more of a regular guy. They have to identify him as an average everyday Canadian. Remember, he's up against Carney, Carney has a long list of accomplishments outside of politics.
Yeah.
This is the first time he's been a politician, and he's got PhDs, and he's got in economics. He has a solid performing and in private business. He's become a millionaire. He started with fairly humble roots, and he's a self-made man. He's gone through Harvard. He's gone through Oxford. He's got PhDs in economics. He's got a whole litany of accomplishments to his name. Polyev does not. Polyev has devoted himself to politics, which is not.
But I think you will find, like Harper, Carney will improve his French.
Oh, quite possibly. That's a strong requirement. Right now, if the elections were held tomorrow, or today, basically, the Liberals would win a majority as things go now. So I expect that the Conservatives will bounce back as they change their narrative, as they begin to grow up some steam and change their narrative. There's, I guess, the Conservative Party's really a little bit in a panic, and they're beginning to divide. They were completely behind Polyev, but now are getting worried, and they're trying. And there's some murmurings among the Conservatives that they are running the campaign incorrectly. So once they get their feet wet, probably when they have to shift their narrative, they can't talk about the carbon tax anymore. They can't talk about Justin Trudeau.
Absolutely.
They can't.
While we're talking things about politics, I have to say that I've seen hardly any in my trips around in the falls. I've seen hardly any Andrea Kaiser signs, but according to the polls, at the moment, it's a 45% Liberal lead over Conservatives at 44% in Niagara Falls, Niagara-on-the-Lake. So they're calling this as a toss-up.
Well, that's good news to Andrea Kaiser, but she looked pretty good in one of her previous elections too, and didn't quite make it. As I said, like right now here being on the border, and the Liberals have a better answer to Trump at the moment than the Conservatives do. So I imagine that she will have advantage with the wind at her sails, the Trump wind, basically. Okay.
And also in Niagara South, they're leaning towards the Liberals as well at 45% to 41%, and it's the NDP that are losing out.
That's probably what's bolstering the Liberals more than anything. The NDP have got nothing. They really are flat. They hitched their wagons to the Liberals for far too long, and now they become looked as if they're an irrelevant party. And at a situation like this, where Canadians believe there's an existential threat to their economy and even to their own sovereignty, the NDP just don't have it. This looks like a two-way race to almost everybody out there.
Yeah.
So people are going
Oh,
to
yeah,
choose
absolutely.
conservatives or
Yeah.
liberals as they feel are the best qualified to deal with Trump and his tariffs. And that has sort of taken the wind completely out of the conservative sails. And all their talking points have been adopted by the liberals. The carbon tax is gone. Carbon tax, Carney, who supported the carbon tax right up until he got nominated, now suddenly that's all gone. Okay, no carbon tax.
Yeah.
So he's taken that away from the conservatives. He's also taken away the fact they want to build pipelines. That was the thing liberals didn't want to do beforehand. We're very reluctant to do. Liberals were very, very reluctant to open up mines without forever environmental looks or whatever. Now the liberals are different. Oh, we're going to open up mines. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. So everything that the conservatives have complained about the liberals prior is now taken away.
Yeah. And the other thing, just to cover St. Catharines, it looks like Chris Biddle is going to keep his seat on current polling.
I wouldn't exactly.
He's running at 52% versus Conservative at 36%, and again, the NDP wiped out.
Well, I don't think Tony and Niagara Falls here is at risk just yet. This is early showing, so
I know. And remember these poll situations, the ones I've read out, are a week old anyway.
Yeah, and remember how polls really haven't got it these days. Remember all the polling before, they just didn't get it right in Canadian elections. The last election where Trudeau did the snap election during COVID times, the poll said that he would win a majority, and he didn't do anything of the sort. He ended up exactly where he was. And we have a new situation now where we have this existential threat to our sovereignty and our trade and all that kind of thing from the genius down south there.
Genius. Right. And okay, yes, Randy, I know. I'm only showing the polls just to show what they're like. I'm not saying we believe them, right? Absolutely not. Yeah.
No. I would say that the polls are right in the fact that the trending towards liberals against conservatives has happened. I just don't know how accurate the polls are.
And remember, we've got the most unlikely poll right now when you consider that 6 months ago there was such a massive gap with the Conservatives in the lead, and now you're talking about a gap with the Liberals in the lead. That is just such an unlikely trend statistically. It just, that sort of stuff, those sort of movements just do not happen statistically.
Yeah, so I don't know. The polls, you can't trust them. They're not accurate as they used to be, or if they ever used to be. There's and pollsters tend to believe what they want to believe too. Polls are just a way of manipulating us. Yeah,
to some extent, I believe that. To some extent, I believe that. I also think that I've always been of the opinion that for the last month before an election, we're already into that territory, you shouldn't be allowed to publish polls.
Well, you're not going to be able to stop it because we have the free speech thing. Yeah, and you're right. Who's buying the polls? Who's doctoring them? But what is undisputable, basically indisputable, is the fact that the liberals are on the ascent and the conservatives are on the descent. We don't know how that will work out. Can the conservatives pull it out of the fire? Can the liberals maintain their sort of momentum? When it comes to who's going to win, who's going to lose, the general trends, however, can be seen by polls because you can just talk to your neighbors and talk to everybody else and see that is probably most accurate. Yeah. I'm never I've never really taken polls too seriously when it comes to my own personal vote. I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're going to vote. You're the sort of person that is going to analyze what you believe in, what the parties offer, and you're going to vote accordingly.
Yeah, and this
like myself.
in this election, it's going to be the Rhino Party for sure. The only ones that make sense.
I'm looking for the Monster Raving Loony Party.
Yeah, well, they haven't established a presence in Canada yet. That's because they're probably lost somewhere around.
I should open up become their first president, shouldn't I?
Well, you'd be perfect for it. Yeah, you'd be perfect for it. And meanwhile, you and I could compete. I could be the Rhino Party, and you could be the Monster Raven Loony Party, and we could compete for votes.
Yeah. No. Well, we're having a good laugh at the expense of politicians, but I think that's necessary sometimes. All right.
Yeah. So, well, we don't know what's going to happen here, but we have an incumbent, and the trends have been more conservative up until now. This area here was for years traditionally a liberal area, so we'll see if liberals can retake the area. But well, we'll see. Anyway.
Yeah. All right. So we got so Ontario's first hologram zoo is coming to Niagara Falls. Are we going to see? Apparently, there's not going to be any fences or anything like this, and we're going to see the animals kind of in their natural habitat. Does that mean that we're going to see lions killing giraffes and things like that?
No, it's supposed to be a very, very family friendly zoo, and these things are coming on more and more because people are still very interested in animals, but they have real doubts about zoos and the confinement of animals in zoos, which is a good thing. But if you go to the Toronto Zoo, they have a pretty good idea there. They let the animals roam more, and they're a little bit more freer. Now there's a double purpose for zoos, real live zoos, and those are not only do they educate people about different animals and things like that, and it's very interesting for people to watch, a giraffe or a rhinoceros in the real, provided the animals are not too restricted and they're healthy and all that. Whereas old zoos, you'd have them in a little cage, and of course they were extremely unhappy in situations.
Well, I remember as a kid going to a zoo and seeing a lion, I think, the other side of a cage, and it was in such a small cage.
Yeah, they did that so that the lion couldn't roam around, and so you could get a good look at it.
Yeah,
I remember seeing a gorilla one time in a zoo, and I never saw a more unhappy looking animal in itself. It had a little space, but if you go to the Toronto Zoo, for instance, the gorillas have this big area where they run around, and they get to beat their chest every time they're mad at anybody looking at them. And,
yeah, and it's more like, if you like, the the prisoners in a jail cell, except that the public's looking directly at them.
Yes. Now the one good thing about modern zoos, and there was this Brit, I forget his name now. I used to watch him on TV many years ago. His whole attitude changed, him and others' attitudes changed what zoos were all about. He said that they're very, very important because we have to learn about the animals and species that are in trouble in the world that are dying off. You can have a reserve of those species until the environments in which they come from are safe in which to put them back in. Now you have everything from tiny little frogs. They took all the frogs off of an island somewhere in the Caribbean, I believe, every little frog off of that island that they could find, and brought them into a zoo. and kind of recreated their homeland, basically their environment, in order for those frog populations to prosper, because they had been at risk from disease or environment.
That's a special. That's humans intervening to save animals, and to then with the intention of releasing them back into the wild again. It's an entirely different thing, because it's something that we're doing to help animals, right?
Well, that's what's happening in zoos all over the world now. For instance, you can get they're trying to get a whole lot of rhinoceroses safe. They're not safe in Africa right now, or it's very, very difficult to protect them against poachers and that. So what they do is they get as many as they can here and breed them here or other places that are safe. And eventually, with the hope that that breeding stock, they can reintroduce it into the areas where they come from, when those areas are safe to do so.
The only trouble with
extinction, for instance. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The only trouble with, of course, a lot of zoos, or even those open range kind of parks, is that animals tend not to breed in them. The breeding goes down in zoos and safari parks.
Well, the zoos, that's part of their work, to get an environment where they feel more comfortable enough to be able to breed well enough. And it is working in many areas. They just have to figure it out how best to do it. We find that there's more panda bears, for instance, being born in the wild or in captivity now. This is a good thing, because eventually we reintroduce the pandas where they are. When the environment where they came from becomes safe again. This is a very, very positive thing, I believe, and that is what a lot of zoos now are more focused on.
All right. Okay, so what's the feature of the hologram zoo anyway?
Well, it's basically all holograms, and so you can have charging elephants, you can crocodiles, snakes, and all that other stuff. And they said in the article that it's done in such a way that it wouldn't be that scary for children, especially. So they're eat, despite there's bugs and snakes and scorpions and all manner of things, elephants charging or whatever, that it's done in such a way that the observer doesn't feel threatened, even if it's a child who might be frightened of a holograph.
But you're not walking among the animals.
No, I don't. I think you are. I think if you feel like you're in amongst them, but safe enough too. So basically, they are holograms, and I haven't myself experienced one, but it sounds pretty good. And these seem to be the thing that is becoming very popular now, when people are not too happy with the traditional type of zoo, that you can go to a hologram and become introduced to certain animals this way. Now, of course, it's not the best way. I mean, when I was in Africa and saw animals in their own range, when you have parks and stuff like that reserved for them to continue their lives as they normally would, it's a much different situation. You see them in their, that's good. But then again, you need a lot of money to go there and see them, whereas a hologram will give you some kind of idea. And hopefully it will spark the interest of children, particularly spark the interest and imagination of children, which we want to do.
Yeah, the only thing I can see, though, is the thing I'm slightly worried about is kind of kids reaching out to stroke the nice lion.
As long as it doesn't bite back, they're okay.
And feeling that they can actually get up that close to a lion, and that be safe.
I don't think that will be a problem, but I don't know. It's a good point. I doubt very much that anyone's going to.
Yeah, but again,
anytime soon.
So you can imagine they go up close to the lion in the hologram zoo, and then they'll go to safari park, if there's still those in existence anymore, and they get out the car to go pet the lion.
They're not allowed.
I know they're not allowed, but telling.
Well, there are already fools. There are fools that feed grizzly bears and then get mauled. So,
we already have too many.
You're always going to get a fool, no matter what.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying. That's the negative side, but I can see the positives in this.
Well, it costs a lot less in the long run too. So you can introduce a lot of people to animals, particularly children. I'm thinking mostly of children who have a imagination and interest. They can see them somewhat like they would be in the wild. They would know, of course, they're not real, but they might be real enough, and it would inspire the imagination of children. And that's what we want to do. We want to educate kids, don't we?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, it's all about education and that, and a bit of fun, I guess, for this one.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, and tolls are set to increase at Niagara border crossings. Right, they're going up from $6.50 to $8.50.
That's another reason why Canadians won't be going to the States.
Well, actually, but it's going to work it was going to work for both Americans and Canadians, because when you're doing a return trip, it depends upon where you cross the border. In fact, actually, if you're clever about it, you can go across at one border crossing where you don't pay on the way out, and you can come back at another border crossing where you don't pay on the way back.
Well, yeah, I don't think that works that way. You're going to get nailed no matter where you go.
I know, generally speaking, yes.
So that it's very interesting how it happens, and I think you know what I will ask. I will encourage people to go across the border anytime they want. Remember, there's a lot of people over on that other side, as we reported last week. The elbows up kind of thing between a lot of Americans supporting Canadians, and it's in their own economic interest, particularly border towns like this, to have cross-border traffic a lot back and forth. It's very, very good. It's very, very good for our economy, their economy, and that connection. And you don't want to be shut out of the things that are available in this case, in around Buffalo or Niagara Falls, New York. You don't want to be shut out of the cool stuff they have there. I mean, I go to lacrosse games, and in Buffalo, they got a great lacrosse team. Ben, it's a fabulous lacrosse team. And there's a little casino right there, if you're into that.
Again, what is the likely impact is that border crossings are down.
Yeah, and that has to do with the politics and the Canadian dollar. The Canadian dollar is weak, so we don't have. When we go over there, it's like when you're paying $1.45 for something that costs $1, you kind of you think, oh no, I can't afford this. So that, I think, is as much of a problem as the political thing. But if you add them both together, sort of.
Yeah. Dave? He's gone and died again on us. Okay. Yeah, and this actually is a bad thing, Dave. Mr. Dave Wheeler. Anyway, okay, and I think that's a pretty bad. It's a pretty bad thing that we're ending up paying more, but I think it's because we end up with less cars crossing the border, and that's ultimately what's going to happen, because the border wants to make sure that they still keep the. Hey, Dave.
Come back, yeah.
Yeah. So the border wants to make sure that they keep the income coming in, right?
Yeah, and it's yes, like very very important. Like if there's a favorite place in the States you want to go, just keep going there, because remember the people that are there, that restaurant that you like to go to, that bar, or anything you like, or that theater you might like in Buffalo, just keep going there because there are regular people there that need those jobs, and we don't want to cut into their jobs.
No,
And
absolutely.
we don't want to cut into their jobs, and hopefully they do the same thing and they come over here and keep our what's happening. The geopolitics in Washington right now is so bizarre and beyond uh,
People have
beyond
got to do, yeah, yeah,
we have to bring right back down to people, and that's
yeah.
basically it.
Well, and then the next article that you've got here is tariffs on Canadian goods are having a devastating effect on U.S. farmers. And saying U.S. farmers, right? So U.S. farmers, particularly there was one here from North Dakota, right? South Dakota farmers. We've become such enemies just because of this one man, and yet, to them, trade with Canada is so important.
Yeah, this is something I don't think they banked on. The last time Trump was in and he put big tariffs on China, um, the agricultural sector of the U.S. economy did terrible because China fought back, put tariffs on a lot of American agricultural products, and they lost market share huge. As a matter of fact, the Trump administration had to give them $2 billion as compensation, basically, to keep them afloat. This business now, though, with Canada, it has more to do with things like potash and other agricultural machinery that comes from Canada into the United States, and it's putting a burden on the American
and,
food.
and not only that, it's kind of agricultural products that are so that cross this kind of 100 miles on either side of the border. That is coming. That's such a thing we're just all dependent upon.
Yeah, and yeah, a South Dakota farmer would have a lot more in common with a Manitoba farmer than either one would have with Washington or Toronto.
Yeah, yeah,
So, and the potash particularly is a big deal. That's a fertilizer that Saskatchewan has an abundance of, some of the world's largest reserves. Now, you're not going to be able to open up a potash farm or potash mine in the United States just like that because they don't have the abundance of potash that we do. So to hurt the farmer by putting a 10% 10% on potash, and originally it was 25%, remember, and somebody was able to talk Trump down to 10%. I think any percent on the potash that farmer needs is a bad thing. It's a bad thing for that farmer,
yeah.
particularly when the
Well,
trade.
and
Okay.
when you think about it, the farmers are almost the last people to actually be spoken about because there's the car lobby, there's the oil lobby, there's this and the other industry lobby, and almost the farmers are the most silent, if you like.
It's very interesting to note that farmers are kind of split on this. They tend to be South Dakota and other places in the West tend to be more of Republican types, and they've supported Trump. When they are being interviewed, some say, "Oh, yeah, there's going to be pain, but I trust Trump, and eventually we'll get our agricultural products out more to the market. Our beef and our grain and everything will go out tariff-free, basically, to the rest of the world, and short-term pain, long-term gain." But others see the more immediate thing that it's going to be very, very difficult for them in the short term with these trade policies, and they may have to be subsidized by the federal government, just like they were when Trump did it the first time in his first in his first uh, in his first term, where he put a lot of tariffs on Chinese stuff. They reciprocated, and much of the agricultural products that went to China were replaced by stuff that came from Brazil. So it's a bit dodgy there. I think the farmers remember that,
Oh yeah,
and they
yeah,
remember they had to be subsidized. But like farmers are very independent types, and they don't like that. That's part of their character. They don't like to be subsidized. They want their product to be sold. They don't like the idea of being on a kind of a welfare where the government subsidizes them. They'll do it because it's a matter of survival, but it's against their grain. It's against their character.
yeah.
Anytime you talk to a farmer, they're
Oh yeah,
pretty down to basics. I do this and I get money for that, and I don't want the government to kick in if possible.
yeah. And that's part of the reason they're up at God knows what time in the morning.
Yeah, you can't be more dedicated than a farmer, for crying out loud. I
Yeah,
mean, it's a tough job, and half the reason why they do it is because they're good at it and they like doing it. But what you want to do is make it as easy for the farmers, not as hard for the farmers. You want to give them as much as you freedom as much as you can, and develop the market as best you can. And the United States has an enormous amount of overcapacity when it comes to agricultural products, grains and beef and pork and all that kind of thing. They normally have a huge overcapacity and depend on exports, and that's a good thing because the world needs what they produce. But any kind of disruption in there, where the farmers should be very prosperous with open markets, and now it seems to it's going the other way.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Israeli military changed the account of first responder killings out there in
Yeah,
Gaza.
here's where lies come in, heaped upon lies. The Israelis killed a bunch of first responders, medics, and things like that. The the medics and first responders are required to have a lot of lights on, be very glaring, uh, uh, make it very clear who they are, and let everybody know what they're doing. So a bunch of first responders were heading to someplace, and the Israeli army opened up on them and killed them all except one. One guy survived. The Israeli army says, well, there were Hamas. Their first thing was Hamas was in there among them, and they weren't. They didn't have their lights on, and they didn't make it. They didn't do what they're supposed to be doing. Uh, plus there was all kinds of Hamas among them. When the investigation began to happen, they started finding phones and stuff with what with pictures of what happened. All the emergency vehicles with the medics had all their lights on, all their flashing lights on. So that told everybody that the Israeli army was lying again. And when they investigated and found the 15 people were dead, they were all medics and all first responders. There was no weapons, no nothing, anything that like that. No Hamas operative at all. They were all well-known medics, and so the Israelis were caught out in a lie, and now are trying to lie their way out of lying. And this is very, very typical of the Israelis. Every time they do something like this, they concoct a story, and when that story becomes untrue, well, they say, well, we were misinformed by the operatives on the ground, and blah blah blah. And they initially said that these medics were heading towards a sensitive Israeli position. That turned out to be a lie too. The
Yeah,
Israelis opened up on them from a distance. They weren't anywhere near the Israelis, so the Israelis opened up from quite a distance and just massacred these medics. And that's what they do. And then they lie about it. And
well, and actually, in one of the other, a survivor from one of the other incidents said that he saw that the soldiers were opening fire on clearly marked emergency response vehicles.
yeah, they were clearly marked. They had all their lights on, and all those things the Israelis said they didn't have were on. And it was proven by the films from phones from the dead medics, basically, that were retrieved. The Israelis missed those. Somebody else picked them up, and the Israelis looked foolish and cruel.
Yeah, and actually, the thing is, I think in any war situation, they rely upon the medics. The medics do a lot of work in brave people.
The whole point of the Israeli occupation is to destroy medical, schooling, food, water plants, that whole thing, because they want to make it so terrible a place to live that they can push them out. But I don't know. The world just says silent on this stuff, and
Yeah.
you're not gonna get. Well, Trump said he was gonna save the day and cause a ceasefire, but he doesn't really care, right? He doesn't.
Well, the thing is, he did initially, but the ceasefire's gone haywire now.
Yeah,
And
because
I
he's
haven't heard a word from Trump, and this is what bothers me about this. It's
yeah,
as if,
they ignore Trump. They ignore him because the Israeli lobby is so powerful and they know they can. And right now, Netanyahu is in the States right now complaining about the tariffs that the US has put on Israel. So I think maybe one of the get out strategies for Trump and his tariffs will be to start negotiating quick. They say they have 50 countries on board. Well, Israel will probably be the first one. Israel reduced their tariffs on American stuff immediately and said you should do the same thing, but they got slapped with a 17% tariff anyway. So Netanyahu is going to be there talking to Trump, and you can bet that those tariffs are going away because Trump's going to need the Israeli lobby on his side, and that's the only way.
Netanyahu's plane needs to be diverted via Amsterdam.
Yes, so he can't land anywhere without being arrested because he's being investigated as a war criminal, and so the international court, he could be arrested. He should be arrested in any country that's signatory to the World Court,
Yeah.
National Court.
Which, of course, the ironic thing here is that the United States is not.
No, any of the big countries that do a lot of war and do a lot of bombing, like Russia and China and the United States, don't. They know that would be pretty problematic for them to be part of the international justice system.
Yeah. And in fact, actually, the US has made it clear that they will not give up to the International Criminal Court either their politicians or their members of their armed forces.
Yeah, that's true, and also they won't give up allies like Bibi.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I'm not best pleased with the US right now.
No, yeah, at the best of times, Trump or not Trump, they have difficulty doing these things. But they're a big country that's going to bomb the crap out of people. Even Obama was thought to be. He was called the drone president because he let loose all kinds of drones against the Afghanis and others, and killed a lot of innocent people with those drones. He should be up as a war criminal if you really wanted to put it that way, and he's probably, according to the other, with the other presidents in mind, he probably did the least amount of damage. But of course, he could be brought up in front too of the international court. So so that's why the United States or Russia or China will not join those things.
Yeah.
Because they're constantly at war someplace doing some, thing,
Well, and how many thousand dead are we now in Gaza? Even so, we know we've lost count. We've gotten underestimation, and
it's about 2.3 of the population have died. That would mean that an additional 6% of the population have been wounded. Many of those maimed, legs, eyes, arms, and a great many children. Every time they bomb, they go after, they think they're Hamas operatives inside of a tent. They'll throw a bomb at it and they'll kill the 30 people in and around the guy. Even if they miss the guy, they still kill a lot of people. And it's not always, they don't always get that right. And they always, it's just bomb. And what they did to the medics.
Yeah, they know this.
Or they killed UN people in buildings that were far away from the conflict, and all kinds of outrages. And the world seems to be powerless against it.
Yeah. Okay. And that's what bothers me about all of this stuff, is just how we just, we're not speaking up against it.
Yeah, and I said before, Trump will probably give Netanyahu release Israel from most, if not all, of the tariffs, because he's going to need the Israeli lobby going forward in his own politics. He can't irritate them too much. They're too powerful in the U.S. politics on both sides of the board, on both sides of the aisle. Yeah. So, and that may be part of the off ramp that Trump starts to take. Right now, the stocks are plunging again overnight, and as soon as they open, they're going to go into the red very quickly. And he's going to need an off ramp, and that off ramp will be negotiating quick deals with countries. And Israel may be the first one to get out of tariffs. Then he'll probably go to Vietnam and do some kind of deal with Vietnam. Some of these smaller countries, 50 countries, according to the White House, have phoned and tried to make some kind of tariff deal. So if he makes a few quick ones, that's okay. The Republicans, a lot of Republicans are asking for a 90-day reprieve on the tariffs so that the Congress can have a better look at them. And the Congress also is beginning to ask for 48-hour notice before any more tariffs are put on. So we'll see what happens there. That may be the off-ramp that Trump needs.
It's okay. We can always add tariffs on the penguins.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I heard that. I heard that the U.S. is all those sardines that the penguins have caught. Any surplus will not be sent to the United States now because of this 10% tariff.
Yeah, well,
And, yeah, the herd in McDonald Islands. That sounds really dumb. The one Lesotho. They got Lesotho, the little country, landlocked country of Lesotho, got a 40-something percent tariff. But it's strange. Like the United States imported diamonds, which they can't make themselves or get themselves, but they want diamonds. So they want diamonds for a number of different reasons, some of which is industrial and some of which is just for jewelry.
90% of diamonds are industrial.
Yeah. So Lesotho sold them a lot of diamonds. And of course, Lesotho didn't buy much back because the average person doesn't make a whole lot of money in Lesotho and can't afford anything that comes from the United States. But the United States wanted their diamonds. The United States buys the diamonds, adds value to them, and makes money off of it. But in their convoluted formula, Lesotho is one of these people who are taking advantage of these states. So imagine that. Somebody comes in your country and says, oh, look, let me buy all your diamonds. I need those diamonds. I don't have any. You've got lots, so I'll buy them. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to put a 41% tariff on your diamonds, because you don't buy anything from me. And what's the average person in Lesotho going to be able to buy from the United States anyway? Not much. They don't make any money.
Yeah, big fat zero.
Yeah.
It's
a poor country. It's one of the poorest countries in the world.
Yeah.
But it just happens to have something the United States wants. And that's how convoluted this logic is.
I thought Lesotho was actually one of the sources of blood diamonds.
I don't think so because it's landlocked around South Africa, so it would be hard to get those diamonds in and out without going across South Africa. Plus, South Africa would have eyes on it. Most of the blood diamonds came from more Central Africa than Lesotho, but I'm not sure about that. There could be.
Well, it's a vague memory that Lesotho was a name that I seem to remember blood diamonds from, associated with blood diamonds, but I might be wrong. I'd be happy if I am wrong.
The trade had happened in Liberia and in the Congo and certain areas like that where.
Well, Congo's always been problematic in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like I don't know. That was a terrible thing.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And I think we're going to have to kind of call it quits at that.
Okay. Well, we can watch the stock market plunge again today. Just very, very interested in what kind of off ramp Trump will have. He's whether he's going to postpone the tariffs. Every one of his administrators has a different story. Ludnick has a different story. Navarro has a different story. Hessent has a different story. They all seem to have a different story of what's happening, whether it's a bargaining tool, whether they're fixed in stone. It's all that's part of the problem because nobody knows for sure what's going to happen. But in the short run, it looks as if the stock market's going to plunge south again today. And I'm very interested. April 9th was the day in which a lot of these things will be imposed. And I think what the Trump administration will do is do a lot of very fast deals out there to sort of 50 down the world.
Yeah, if they've got 50 nations on the phone today, they've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, they can they can make some really quick deals and sort things out and say we won. And that's basically what Trump likes to do. He say he won even though he lost, like the election in 2020.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody and have a great day. And Dave?
Without further ado, I bid you pray for peace and don't forget Gaza.